I'm Charles, 35, a software engineer from Boston with what I once thought was a close-knit family. 3 years ago, I created a family fund to help relatives through tough times. Last Tuesday, I received a group message from my parents. "We think it's best you step away for now." My Aunt Patricia immediately reacted with a thumbs up. That night, I replied simply and withdrew my contribution. By morning, my phone exploded with panic. They never realized how much I actually controlled. Before I jump into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how this all unfolded. I grew up in a comfortable upper-middle-class neighborhood in Lexington, Massachusetts. My parents worked hard to provide us with opportunities they never had, but there were always clear expectations about money. My father, Richard, built his career as a financial advisor with a reputation for strict discipline and conservative investment strategies. At home, he applied those same principles, teaching me and my sister Jennifer about saving, compound interest, and delayed gratification before we could even ride bikes. My mother, Elizabeth, supported his financial philosophy completely. Though warmer in her approach, she never contradicted his decisions about money. She managed the household budget with precision that reflected my father's influence. Together, they created a stable, if somewhat rigid, financial foundation for our family. Then there was Aunt Patricia, my father's younger sister. Despite growing up with the same parents and opportunities, she took a different path. Where my father was disciplined with money, Patricia spent freely. She harbored a barely disguised envy of our lifestyle, making subtle comments about our family vacations or my mother's new car. Her son, my cousin Derek, grew up without the financial boundaries I had. By his 20s, Derek cycled through a series of emergencies that always required financial bailouts, usually provided reluctantly by my father. On my mother's side was Uncle Robert, a hard-working contractor who built his business from scratch. Unlike Patricia, Robert never asked for handouts, even when the housing market crashed and nearly bankrupted him. His pride and work ethic impressed me from an early age. My sister Jennifer married young to her college sweetheart, Mark. They had 2 children back-to-back, and then Mark was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition. The medical bills strained their finances despite having insurance. Jennifer never complained, picking up extra shifts as a nurse while caring for her family. My own path was different. I showed an early interest in computers, spending hours learning to code while other kids played sports. My parents supported this interest, but insisted I earn my own way. I worked through high school building websites for local businesses and won a partial scholarship to Northeastern University. Even with the scholarship, I worked 20 hours weekly at the campus IT department to avoid student loans. After graduation, I joined a small tech startup for less money than my classmates made at bigger companies. The gamble paid off when we were acquired 3 years later. With my first real windfall, I paid off my remaining student debt and made smart investments in tech stocks and early-stage startups. By 30, I had moved to a senior development position at one of Boston's fastest-growing tech companies. By 33, I was earning more annually than my father, a fact he acknowledged with a mixture of pride and what I now recognize was discomfort. The idea for the family fund came during Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Jennifer was sharing updates about Mark's treatment, carefully avoiding the topic of cost. Later that night, I overheard her crying in the kitchen, telling my mother they might have to pull their son from his private school. The next morning, before the traditional football game, I proposed creating a family support fund. "We're fortunate to be doing well," I said, addressing my father primarily. "Why not create a structured way to help each other through tough times?" My father's initial reaction was skeptical. "People need to stand on their own feet," he said, repeating one of his lifelong mantras. "Financial bailouts create dependency." "Not bailouts," I clarified. "Temporary support with clear parameters, like a family bank with better terms." After several discussions, he reluctantly agreed, but insisted on maintaining oversight of the fund's management. I would be the primary contributor, initially putting in 60% of the capital, with my parents contributing 30% and smaller contributions from others who could afford it. We established formal policies about what qualified as legitimate needs, repayment expectations, and decision-making processes. The fund's early successes were meaningful. We helped Uncle Robert secure equipment for a new specialized renovation service that revitalized his business. When Mark needed to travel out of state for specialized treatment, the fund covered Jennifer's lost wages and childcare, allowing her to focus on her husband's health. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things began to change. About 18 months in, Aunt Patricia began advocating for Derek to receive emergency assistance with increasing frequency. First, it was car repairs so he could get to his new job. Then it was rent assistance after a roommate moved out unexpectedly. Next came help with credit card debt he'd accumulated during a rough patch. Each time, I noticed my father becoming less rigorous about documentation and repayment terms. When I raised questions during our quarterly review sessions, he'd brush me off with vague assurances that family takes care of family, ironic considering his previous stance. I also noticed subtle shifts in family dynamics. Relatives who previously treated me as just Charles, the computer guy who brought good wine to gatherings, now approached me differently. Conversations would often steer toward my work and success. Holiday and birthday gifts to me became noticeably more expensive, even from family members I knew were struggling. During a summer barbecue at my parents' house, I attempted to suggest implementing more structured approval processes for the fund. "We need better documentation," I said, "and maybe a committee approach instead of ad hoc decisions." "Are you saying you don't trust how I'm managing things?" my father replied sharply, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I wondered if creating the fund had been a mistake. I couldn't have imagined how prophetic that concern would prove to be. 6 months after that barbecue, I received the quarterly statement for the family fund. Something felt off about the numbers. The balance was lower than projected despite my consistent contributions. Looking more closely at the transaction history, I noticed a pattern: increasingly frequent withdrawals for Derek's various situations. Over coffee the next morning, I pulled up the spreadsheet I'd created to track the fund's activity. The data showed Derek had received assistance 4 times in the past quarter alone, more than all other family members combined over the same period. Each withdrawal was categorized under emergency assistance with minimal documentation. That same afternoon, scrolling through Instagram, I saw Derek's post showing off his brand new PlayStation and gaming setup. The timestamp was just 3 days after he'd received $5,000 from the fund for what my father had described as essential transportation needs. I called my father immediately. "Dad, I just saw Derek's new gaming setup on social media. Didn't we just approve money for car repairs?" "Charles," he sighed, "I don't monitor how everyone spends every penny once their legitimate needs are met. That's not our place. But if he can afford luxury electronics, look, there are family matters you might not understand. Patricia is going through a difficult time with her divorce. Derek's situation is complicated. That's exactly why we created clear guidelines," I countered, "to remove complications and emotions from financial decisions." "I think you're being unnecessarily rigid," he replied, his tone hardening. "This isn't one of your computer programs with yes divided by no outcomes. This is family." The conversation ended abruptly when he claimed he had another call. That evening, I received a text from my mother asking me not to upset your father with fund matters because he was under enough stress. The following Sunday, I brought up my concerns at a family dinner. The reaction was immediate and discouraging. My father dismissed my questions as administrative details we could discuss privately. Aunt Patricia made passive-aggressive comments about people who count every penny, not understanding real family loyalty. My mother kept changing the subject, while Jennifer remained conspicuously silent. During dessert, when Patricia mentioned Derek's upcoming weekend trip to Miami, I couldn't help but connect it to his recent fund withdrawal. The tension in the room became palpable. I felt like I was suddenly cast as the villain, simply for asking questions about money that was largely my own. Driving home, I decided to investigate further. Over the next 2 weeks, I meticulously tracked every fund transaction from inception, creating a comprehensive spreadsheet comparing stated purposes against actual outcomes I could verify. The results were disturbing. Nearly 70% of recent disbursements went to Derek, while legitimate requests from other family members were delayed or denied. I reached out to Jennifer for her perspective, meeting her for lunch near the hospital where she worked. "Have you asked for help from the fund recently?" I asked after we'd covered the usual updates about her kids and Mark's health. Jennifer looked down at her salad. "We considered it. Mark's medication changed, and the new one has a higher copay. but Dad said the fund was temporarily depleted and to check back next quarter. My stomach tightened. According to my records, the fund had sufficient resources at that time. In fact, a significant contribution from me had been processed just days before Jennifer's inquiry. "What about Uncle Robert?" I asked. "Has he mentioned anything?" "Actually, yes," she said, lowering her voice despite the busy restaurant. "He was counting on a loan for some specialized equipment. Dad told him the same thing, funds temporarily unavailable." That evening, I called Uncle Robert directly. After some hesitation, he confirmed Jennifer's account, adding that my father had suggested he explore commercial lending options instead, exactly the high-interest solutions our fund was created to help family members avoid. As the quarterly family meeting approached, I prepared a detailed presentation. I wasn't looking to embarrass anyone, just to redirect the fund back to its original purpose. I created charts showing disbursement patterns, comparison tables of stated versus actual uses, and a proposed reformed approval process with multiple family members involved. The meeting began normally enough at my parents' dining room table. When the agenda reached fund performance review, I connected my laptop to the TV and began my presentation. I hadn't even finished the second slide when my father interrupted. "Charles, this isn't necessary," he said firmly. "We all trust that the fund is being managed appropriately, but the data shows—" "I said this isn't necessary," he repeated, standing up. "We're not in your corporate boardroom." Aunt Patricia chimed in. "This is exactly what I was talking about. Charles thinks because he contributes more, he gets to control everything." "That's not it at all," I protested. "I just want transparency." "Transparency?" Patricia scoffed. "You mean surveillance. Derek told me how you've been watching his social media, tracking what he buys. That's disturbing behavior, Charles." I looked around the table, hoping for support. Jennifer studied her hands. Uncle Robert shifted uncomfortably. My mother looked on the verge of tears. "I think," my father said in the tone he used for final decisions, "we should table this discussion and move on to more productive topics." The meeting continued, but I barely participated. Something fundamental had shifted. The fund I created to strengthen family bonds was now driving us apart. Walking to my car afterward, I felt a deep disappointment settling in my chest, my first real indication that my relationship with my family was changing in ways I couldn't control. The weeks following that disastrous family meeting brought a noticeable chill to my family relationships. My parents' regular check-in calls became less frequent and more perfunctory. Family gatherings gained a strained quality, with conversations remaining superficial. I noticed I was no longer automatically included in smaller family events, dinners, movie nights, or impromptu gatherings that I would typically have heard about. Most concerning was Jennifer's sudden distance. My sister and I had always been close, texting almost daily about everything from her kids' achievements to TV shows we both followed. Now my messages often went unanswered for days, and her responses were uncharacteristically brief. When we did speak, she seemed guarded, as if measuring her words carefully. 3 weeks after the family meeting, I took a legal step I never imagined would be necessary. I contacted the bank where our family fund was held and, as a primary account holder, requested complete records of all transactions. What I received shocked me to my core. Beyond the preferential treatment for Derek that I had already documented, there were transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Several large withdrawals had been processed without the dual authorization we had originally established. Most disturbingly, I discovered my father had quietly amended the account structure 8 months earlier, removing some of the oversight controls we had initially agreed upon. The betrayal deepened when I found evidence of a special meeting in the fund's notes, a gathering of family members to discuss fund operations that I had never been informed about. According to the minutes, which had been filed with the fund documentation, various family members had voted to streamline decision-making procedures, effectively concentrating control with my father. But the true gut punch came when I discovered a substantial transfer labeled Property Investment Opportunity that precisely matched the down payment amount for a vacation cabin in Vermont that my parents had recently mentioned purchasing. They had positioned it as something they'd been saving toward for years, never mentioning that family fund resources had been utilized. I needed answers directly from my father. I arranged to meet him for lunch at a steakhouse he favored, away from family ears. After brief small talk about the Red Sox's prospects for the season, I placed a folder on the table. "Dad, I need to understand some things about the family fund." His expression immediately hardened. "I thought we agreed to table that discussion." "That was before I saw these," I said, sliding several printed transactions across the table. "Can you explain why fund money was used for your Vermont cabin down payment?" His face flushed. "That's not exactly how it happened." "The numbers match exactly," I pressed. "It was a temporary bridge loan," he insisted. "We're paying it back with interest. There's no repayment schedule documented." "And why wasn't I informed?" "I contribute 60% of that fund." "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this," he snapped. "Treating family like some corporate audit. That money isn't just sitting there doing nothing. It's being put to good use." Good use was helping Jennifer with medical bills and Uncle Robert with his business. Not vacation properties and Derek's gaming systems. The conversation escalated rapidly. My father shifted between defensive justification and attacking my character. "You've changed," he said. "Success has made you think you're better than the rest of us." "Money isn't everything, Charles." "This isn't about money," I countered. "It's about trust and honesty." By the time our untouched steaks had gone cold, he delivered his ultimatum. "Either you trust us to manage family matters without your constant interference, or maybe you should reconsider your participation." As I stood to leave, he added the words that would echo in my mind for weeks. "Maybe you care more about money than family, Charles." The accusation stung precisely because it inverted the truth so completely. I had created the fund out of care for my family, not for control or recognition. The drive home became a blur of emotions, betrayal, anger, and a deep sadness that my intentions had been so fundamentally misunderstood. The situation began affecting other areas of my life. I found myself distracted at work, missing details in code reviews that I would typically catch immediately. Sleep became elusive, with my mind replaying conversations and imagining confrontations that hadn't happened. I canceled social plans, preferring isolation to explaining my distracted mood to friends. After 2 weeks of this downward spiral, my friend Marcus intervened. We had been college roommates, and he knew me well enough to recognize something was seriously wrong. Over beers in my apartment, I finally unburdened myself, explaining the entire situation from the fund's creation to my father's accusation. "Charles," he said after listening intently, "you realize this isn't normal, right? Using your money while excluding you from decisions and then making you the bad guy for asking questions?" "They're family," I said weakly. "That makes it worse, not better," he replied. "Would you accept this behavior from anyone else?" Marcus encouraged me to see a therapist, connecting me with someone who specialized in family dynamics. Dr. Thomas helped me recognize patterns I'd been blind to, how my financial success had created both dependency and resentment, how my role had shifted from son divided by brother to provider, and how that shift had distorted natural family relationships. "Your generosity created a power imbalance," Dr. Thomas explained. "Your family is struggling to reconcile their financial dependence with their desire to maintain traditional family hierarchy." Just as I was beginning to process these insights, Jennifer finally agreed to meet for coffee. Her revelation added another layer to my pain. "Dad and Mom told everyone you threatened to sue the family," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Aunt Patricia has been saying you're trying to control everyone through money, that you've become power-hungry." "None of that is true," I said, stunned. "I just asked for transparency about funds that are mostly mine." Jennifer looked miserable. "I know. But they had this family call without you, and Mom said you might be having some kind of breakdown from work stress, that we should limit discussions about money to protect your mental health." The systematic dismantling of my reputation within the family became clearer with each passing day. Uncle Robert, once warm and appreciative, now barely met my eyes at a chance encounter at the hardware store. Cousins who previously sought my advice about careers or investments stopped reaching out entirely. Most bizarrely, I learned from Jennifer that Derek was now positioning himself as a financial advisor to the family, offering investment tips at gatherings I wasn't invited to. The irony would have been comical if it hadn't been so painful. The cousin who couldn't manage his own finances now giving advice to others, while I, with my actual expertise and track record, was being pushed to the margins. The realization that my character was being actively maligned by the people I'd worked so hard to support created a deeper wound than the financial betrayal ever could. Family wasn't just misusing my money. They were rewriting who I was. Tuesday started like any ordinary workday. I arrived at the office early to prepare for a 9 o'clock product review meeting. The development team had been working for months on a new feature, and my presentation to the executive team would determine if we'd get the additional resources needed to launch by fourth quarter. The meeting went well. Our CTO asked challenging questions that I was prepared for, and the CEO seemed genuinely impressed with the potential revenue projections. As we filed out of the conference room, I felt a rare moment of professional satisfaction untainted by family stress. That feeling evaporated at 12:34 p.m. when my phone buzzed with a notification from our family messaging group. I was walking to the company cafe for lunch when I saw my father's name and the preview text, "Important family announcement." Standing in the corridor outside the cafe, surrounded by colleagues chatting about weekend plans and project deadlines, I opened the full message. To all family members, after careful consideration and many discussions, we, Elizabeth and I, feel that for the good of family harmony, it would be best if Charles stepped away from family decisions for a while. His constant questioning creates division where we need unity. We believe it's best if he steps back from family decisions for a time, including fund management. We'll continue to manage the fund responsibly, as we always have. Hope everyone understands this comes from a place of love and concern for our family's well-being. Richard and Elizabeth. The message hit me like a physical blow. My colleagues' voices faded to background noise as I stared at my phone, reading and rereading the message. Before I could even process a response, notifications began appearing under the message. Aunt Patricia. Uncle Robert. I understand. Cousin Sarah. Whatever you think is best. Jennifer. No response. Derek. Definitely for the best. The thumbs up from Aunt Patricia felt like a knife twist. After everything I'd contributed, her immediate approval of my exclusion revealed her true feelings with stark clarity. I must have looked physically ill because a colleague touched my shoulder asking if I was okay. Mumbling something about needing air, I pushed through the glass doors to the building's exterior courtyard. The bright May sunshine felt incongruous with the darkness spreading through my chest. I loosened my tie, struggling to breathe normally as I slumped onto a stone bench. For 20 minutes I sat there, alternately staring at the message and looking blindly at the ornamental cherry trees swaying in the spring breeze. Office workers lounged at nearby tables, laughing and enjoying the weather, their normalcy highlighting how my world had just shifted beneath my feet. My first instinct was to call Marcus, but I knew he was in court all day. Instead, I texted him a screenshot with the message, "They actually did it. They pushed me out." Then I methodically analyzed each element of my parents' message, the way I would debug problematic code. After careful consideration and many discussions I was never part of, decisions about me, without me, for the good of family harmony, positioning me as the source of discord rather than the lack of transparency. His constant questioning creates division, reframing my legitimate concerns as destructive behavior. We'll continue to manage the fund responsibly as we always have, despite evidence to the contrary. This comes from a place of love. The most painful line, using love as justification for exclusion. I canceled my afternoon meetings and walked aimlessly through Boston's financial district, trying to process the magnitude of this public rejection. 3 hours and 4 miles later, I found myself at the harbor, watching boats navigate the channel as the reality of my situation crystallized. My family had become financially dependent on me while resenting that very dependence. Rather than acknowledge the uncomfortable power dynamics created by my contributions, they had chosen to scapegoat me, casting me as controlling and difficult to preserve their self-image and continue benefiting from my resources. The fund had grown substantially over 3 years. My contributions alone totaled over $250,000. But beyond the direct contributions, I had quietly added numerous other financial supports. I was co-signer on Jennifer's student loans, had provided my parents with authorized user cards on my premium credit accounts for emergencies, maintained joint investment ventures with my father, served as guarantor for Uncle Robert's business loan, and held life insurance and retirement accounts with family members as beneficiaries. The family fund had transformed from a safety net into a power tool, and my exclusion from decisions was the final confirmation that my role was meant to be provider, not participant. The expectation was clear. Continue contributing financially while surrendering any right to oversight or input. Sitting at the harbor as evening approached, I received a call from Jennifer, the only family member who hadn't responded to the group message. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. "Not really," I admitted. "Did you know they were going to do this?" Her hesitation told me everything. "They mentioned discussing fund structure with you. I had no idea they would send that message." "It's not right, Charles." "Thanks for saying that," I said, genuinely grateful for even this small acknowledgement. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I replied honestly, "but I think it's time I respected their wishes completely." After we hung up, I walked to a nearby coffee shop and opened my laptop. I began drafting a formal email requesting an audit of the family fund, listing all the questionable transactions and calling for a formal meeting with all contributors present. My finger hovered over the send button for nearly a minute before I closed the draft without sending. Instead, I called my personal financial advisor, explaining the situation and asking about my options for formally withdrawing from the various financial entanglements with my family. "It's complicated but entirely doable," she assured me. "We should move methodically to protect your interests while minimizing disruption. When would you like to start this process?" "Tonight," I said, my decision crystallizing. "I want everything in motion before I respond to their message." "Are you sure?" she asked. "Family financial separations can be irreversible." I thought of Aunt Patricia's thumbs up, of Derek's luxury purchases, of the secret meetings and undermined trust, of being labeled unstable and controlling, for simply asking for transparency about my own money. "Yes," I said, "I'm sure." By 9:30 that evening, I had a clear strategy and had initiated the first steps in untangling myself from my family's finances. At 10:14, I finally replied to the group message with a single line, "Understood. I'll respect that, and step away from the family fund too." The simplicity of my response masked the complexity of actions already underway. As I set my phone down, a strange calm settled over me, the certainty of finally standing up for myself after years of having my generosity weaponized against me. My response to the family group chat triggered immediate reactions. Within minutes, my phone lit up with private messages. "Mom, Charles, that's not what we meant. Of course, we still want your contributions. Dad, let's not be hasty. We should discuss this privately. Aunt Patricia, don't be dramatic. Nobody asked you to leave the fund." I silenced my phone and turned to the task at hand. The calm clarity I felt wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about finally establishing the boundaries I should have set years ago. With methodical precision, I began executing the plan I had developed with my financial advisor. First, I drafted and signed a formal letter withdrawing from the fund management structure, effective immediately. The document, prepared with input from my lawyer, clearly stated I would no longer participate in or contribute to the family fund in any capacity. I sent digital copies to the fund's bank, my parents, and my attorney, with physical copies to follow by certified mail. Next, I logged into my banking portal and canceled the automatic monthly contribution of $5,000 that had been flowing into the fund since its inception. That simple action, a few clicks that took less than 30 seconds, ended a financial commitment that had totaled more than $180,000 over the past 3 years. The legal requirement for a final accounting was actually a blessing in disguise. As a major contributor withdrawing from the fund, I was entitled to a complete reconciliation of all assets and liabilities. This would force transparency regardless of family resistance. With the core withdrawal complete, I moved on to the broader financial disconnection. One by one, I addressed each entanglement. I contacted the student loan servicer handling Jennifer's education debt, for which I had served as co-signer. I didn't want to harm my sister, so rather than removing my guarantee immediately, which could have triggered a rate increase, I arranged to pay off the remaining balance in full from my own savings. Jennifer would never know unless she checked her loan portal. The debt would simply show as satisfied. Next, I called my credit card company and requested immediate cancellation of the authorized user cards I had provided to my parents for emergencies only. Over the years, those cards had seen increasingly frequent use for expenses that stretched the definition of emergency considerably. The representative confirmed the cards would stop working by midnight. The joint investment ventures with my father required more delicate handling. We had pooled resources for several commercial real estate projects in the Boston area, with the understanding that my technical expertise in vetting the properties would complement his financial management experience. I instructed my financial advisor to initiate the process of either buying out my father's interests or selling my stakes entirely, whichever proved more expedient. Perhaps the most significant move involved Uncle Robert's business loan. 3 years earlier, when his contracting business was expanding, I had provided a personal guarantee that enabled him to secure favorable terms for equipment financing. Removing this guarantee wouldn't cause immediate problems, but it would trigger a loan review that might lead to adjusted terms or accelerated payment schedules. Throughout the evening, I methodically updated beneficiary designations on my life insurance policies, retirement accounts, and investment portfolios. Family members who had been positioned to receive substantial inheritances were replaced with charitable foundations, focusing on financial literacy and entrepreneurship support. Working with my attorney via late-night emails, I created a comprehensive timeline documenting the fund's history, my contributions, and the pattern of exclusion and mismanagement. This wasn't for immediate use, but rather insurance against potential claims or accusations that might emerge once the full impact of my withdrawal became apparent. By midnight, I had changed passwords on all personal financial accounts and activated enhanced security measures, including two-factor authentication and login notifications. I didn't truly believe my family would attempt unauthorized access, but recent events had shaken my fundamental trust. The final step involved preemptively informing my employer's legal department about the potential for family discord that might spill over into my professional life. Without sharing excessive details, I noted that a family financial dispute was underway and requested that any inquiries about me be directed to the appropriate channels rather than shared with colleagues. At 1:30 in the morning, exhausted but clear-headed, I reviewed the list of actions taken and pending. In less than 4 hours, I had fundamentally altered financial relationships that had been building for years. The magnitude of the change should have been anxiety-inducing. Yet I felt an unexpected lightness, as if setting these boundaries had lifted a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged. Marcus called shortly after I'd crawled into bed, returning from a late dinner after his court appearance. "I got your text," he said. "Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" "I'm actually better than I've been in months," I replied, surprised by the truth in that statement. "I've withdrawn completely." "What do you mean completely?" I explained the steps I'd taken, from the formal fund withdrawal to the broader financial separation. "Wow," Marcus said after a long pause. "That's comprehensive. How do you think they'll react?" "They'll be shocked," I said. "They want me excluded from decisions but included in funding. They're about to learn those things can't be separated. Are you prepared for the fallout? Family can hit below the belt." I thought about that question seriously before answering. I've spent 3 years trying to support my family the way I thought was right. Tonight, I finally supported myself. Whatever happens next, I can face it knowing I stood up for my own worth. "I'm proud of you," Marcus said simply. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow might be intense." As I drifted towards sleep, I mentally prepared for the inevitable confrontations. With my therapist's guidance, I had developed responses for the accusations likely to come, that I was being petty, that I was punishing the family, that money had changed me. I rehearsed calm replies that neither apologized for my boundaries nor attacked in return. For the first time in months, I fell asleep quickly and without anxiety. The path ahead might be difficult, but it was my path, chosen with clarity and self-respect. Whatever storms were brewing would arrive soon enough, but for now, I had found my footing on solid ground. The storm broke at exactly 2:10 a.m. when my phone began buzzing with incoming calls. Half awake, I glanced at the screen to see my father's name flashing repeatedly. I silenced the device and rolled over, committed to addressing the situation after a full night's rest. By 6:30 a.m., when my alarm sounded, I had 99 missed calls from various family members, with my parents and Aunt Patricia leading the count. The voicemails and text messages painted a clear picture of escalating panic. 2:23 a.m. "Dad, Charles, call me immediately. There's been a mistake with the bank." 2:45 a.m. Mom. Sweetheart, please pick up. Your father is very upset. 3:12 a.m. Aunt Patricia. What have you done? Derek's car payment was rejected. 4:07 a.m. Dad. The bank has frozen the entire fund pending review. They're saying there's suspicious activity. You need to call them and explain. 5:14 a.m. Dad. Voicemail. What happened? The bank flagged everything. They're saying there's been a major change in account structure. They need your authorization to process any transactions. Call me back now. I sent a single text response to my father. I'm honoring your decision. You wanted me to step away, and I have, completely. Showered and dressed for work, I sat at my kitchen counter reviewing emails that had arrived overnight. The financial institutions had moved with impressive efficiency. The family fund was indeed frozen pending review, standard procedure when a major contributor withdraws. My father's business credit line was flagged for reassessment without my guarantee. Derek's luxury car lease, which I discovered had been secretly co-signed using my credit, had been suspended. And the mortgage company financing Aunt Patricia's vacation home, partially secured by my assets, another arrangement made without my full knowledge, had sent notice of terms review. My phone rang again. Jennifer this time, I answered, bracing myself. Charles, what's happening? Her voice was shaking. Mom and Dad are absolutely frantic. There's some emergency family meeting at their house right now. They didn't invite me, I assume, I said, keeping my tone neutral. No, she admitted. But Charles, did you know your name was on the kids' college fund? The bank called saying the account structure has changed, and now Dad's saying that money might not be there for Thomas and Emma's education. This was news to me. Jennifer, I never signed anything regarding your children's education fund. If my name is on those accounts, it was done without my knowledge. The silence on her end spoke volumes. I'll look into it, I promised. Your children's education is important to me. But Jennifer, you need to understand. Dad and Aunt Patricia have been using my name and credit for all sorts of things without telling me. This is exactly why I needed transparency. It's chaos here, she said quietly. Dad's talking about lawyers and Mom's been crying all morning. Aunt Patricia is saying you've destroyed the family. I stepped away, exactly as they asked. I replied. I'm sorry for the disruption, but I won't apologize for establishing boundaries. After we hung up, I forwarded Jennifer's concern about the children's education fund to my financial advisor with instructions to investigate immediately. Unlike the other financial entanglements, this was one I wanted to maintain, though with proper documentation and direct control rather than through the family fund structure. I had just arrived at my office when security called to inform me that my parents were in the lobby, insisting on seeing me. Taking a deep breath, I asked security to direct them to a small conference room near reception rather than allowing them up to my department floor. When I entered the room, the physical manifestation of their panic was striking. My father, normally impeccably dressed and composed, looked like he hadn't slept, his shirt wrinkled and hair unkempt. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed from crying, her hands clutching a crumpled tissue. What have you done? My father demanded before I'd even closed the door. Exactly what you asked, I replied calmly, taking a seat across from them. I stepped away. You know that's not what we meant, he shouted. We meant step back from questioning decisions, not withdraw your support entirely. That wasn't specified in the message, I said. And given that I was explicitly excluded from decisions while being expected to provide funding, withdrawal was the only self-respecting option. Do you have any idea what you've caused? He continued. The bank has frozen everything. Robert's business loan is under review. Patricia might lose her house. Derek's car was repossessed this morning. I'm aware, I said. These are the natural consequences of financial structures built on my credit and contributions without my knowledge or consent. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling. Charles, please, we can fix this. Just call the bank and tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, I said gently but firmly. This is a deliberate decision to honor your request that I step away. My father's tone shifted from anger to negotiation. Look, we can change how the fund operates. You can have more input. We'll have regular meetings, total transparency. Just reverse whatever you did. That offer comes only after you've lost access to my money, I observed. Why wasn't transparency an option when I was asking for it before? You're punishing the entire family because your feelings were hurt, he accused. No, I corrected. I'm establishing healthy boundaries after discovering my trust and generosity were being exploited. For nearly an hour, the conversation cycled through their attempts to make me reverse my decision. My father alternated between anger, bargaining, and guilt-inducing comments about family members who would suffer. My mother appealed to emotion, recalling family memories and suggesting I was throwing away lifelong bonds over a misunderstanding. Throughout, I maintained calm, neither raising my voice nor accepting responsibility for the chaos my withdrawal had created. When it became clear I wouldn't budge, my father made a final attempt. Your grandfather would be ashamed, he said. He taught us that family always comes first. He also taught us about integrity and honest dealing, I replied. I wonder what he would think about secret meetings, hidden financial arrangements, and calling me mentally unstable to the family when I asked for accountability. My mother gasped. Who told you that? It doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that it happened, along with many other breaches of trust I've discovered. As they finally left, my father turned at the door. This isn't over. The family needs that money. That's exactly the problem, I replied. The relationship became about money, not family. Throughout the day, the calls continued. Aunt Patricia left a scathing voicemail accusing me of deliberately timing my withdrawal to cause maximum damage. Derek is devastated, she claimed. His car was his livelihood. This was news to me, as Derek had been between jobs for months, according to family updates. Uncle Robert's approach was different. He called once, and when I answered, he spoke thoughtfully. I don't blame you, Charles, he said. I've been uncomfortable with how things were being handled for some time. I just didn't want to rock the boat. I appreciate that, Robert, I replied, genuinely moved by his understanding. My loan terms will change without your guarantee, he acknowledged. But that's on me, not you. I should never have accepted an arrangement that put your credit at risk without proper oversight. His integrity stood in stark contrast to the entitled reactions from other family members. We ended the call with a tentative plan to meet for lunch the following week, separate from the family drama. By early evening, Jennifer called again with updates from the emergency family meeting I hadn't been invited to attend. According to her, reality was beginning to set in for everyone. Dad finally admitted that he's been using the fund in ways that weren't originally intended, she said, and Mom apologized for the group message. She said Dad insisted it was necessary to get you in line before you caused problems. How do you feel about all this? I asked. Confused, angry, sad, she admitted. I had no idea how much we all depended on you financially. It feels wrong, seeing it all laid bare like this. I never minded helping, I clarified. I just needed honesty and respect in return. Before ending the call, Jennifer shared one more revelation. Aunt Patricia tried to blame everything on you, but Uncle Robert finally spoke up. He told everyone about times Dad denied him help while approving things for Derek. It got pretty heated. The next morning brought a shift in tactics. My father sent an email with the subject line, Proposed Resolution. It outlined a new structure for the family fund, including regular oversight meetings, documented approval processes, and quarterly financial reviews. The tone was formal and businesslike, with none of the emotional manipulation of the previous day. My response was equally measured. I acknowledged his proposal but noted that any potential future involvement from me would require additional conditions. Family counseling to address the breach of trust, formal recognition of my right to establish financial boundaries, and an understanding that support would be individualized based on relationship quality rather than general family obligation. I'm open to supporting family members who show respect and honesty, I wrote. But blanket financial responsibility without corresponding relationship quality is no longer on the table. Aunt Patricia's reaction to my terms was predictable. She sent a group message, pointedly, including me this time, declaring that I was holding the family hostage and suggesting everyone should remember this betrayal when Charles needs us someday. What she failed to recognize was that her message only reinforced my decision. The transactional view of family relationships, the idea that financial support should buy future consideration, was exactly the dynamic I was rejecting. In contrast, Jennifer and I began rebuilding our relationship on more honest footing. Over coffee that weekend, she admitted she'd felt pressured to distance herself from me. "Dad said you were going through something and needed space," she explained. I should have trusted my instincts that something wasn't right. "We all have blind spots when it comes to family," I assured her. We agreed to maintain our sibling relationship independent of the larger family drama, and I privately arranged to continue supporting my niece and nephew's education through properly documented trusts in their names. Uncle Robert similarly chose relationship over alliance, meeting me for the promised lunch and sharing his own frustrations with the family's financial entanglements. "Your father has good intentions," he said, "but somewhere along the way, money and control became too intertwined." By the 2-week mark, the immediate crisis had stabilized into a new reality. Some family relationships were strengthening through honesty, while others remained fractured. My parents alternated between reconciliation attempts and cold withdrawal, depending on which approach they thought might best restore the financial support they'd come to depend on. Through it all, I maintained the boundaries I'd established, neither yielding to guilt nor responding with hostility. As my therapist had suggested, I found strength in the simple phrase I repeated when pressured. "I understand you're disappointed, but my decision stands." This wasn't the family dynamic I had hoped for when creating the fund 3 years earlier. But it was a dynamic based on truth rather than financial dependency and unspoken expectations. In that uncomfortable clarity, I found an integrity that no amount of family harmony built on dishonesty could provide. The first month after my financial separation was the hardest. Despite the rightness of my decision, I experienced genuine grief, mourning the family relationships I thought I had versus the reality that had been revealed. There were nights I questioned everything, wondering if I had overreacted or if reconciliation without boundaries might have been possible. My support system proved invaluable during this period. Marcus checked in regularly, offering both distraction and perspective when I needed it. My therapist helped me process the complex emotions without judgment. Colleagues who had noticed my distraction before commented on my renewed focus and energy, unaware of the personal revolution behind it. Gradually, the raw edges of the experience began to smooth. 3 months after the group message that triggered everything, I had established a new normal that prioritized my well-being without closing the door on healing family relationships, but only on healthier terms. Jennifer and I rebuilt our sibling bond, stronger for having weathered the family storm together. Our weekly lunch dates became a safe space for honest conversations about family dynamics we'd both been conditioned not to question. Through her, I maintained connections with my niece and nephew, establishing college funds in their names with clear, documented terms that couldn't be redirected or misused. Uncle Robert and I developed a mentor relationship that benefited us both. His contracting business adapted to the loan restructuring necessitated by my withdrawal as guarantor, and in the process, he implemented more sophisticated financial controls that ultimately strengthened his operation. I found satisfaction in helping him navigate these changes without creating renewed dependency. My parents' journey toward acceptance moved in fits and starts. Initial attempts to re-establish the old dynamic, where financial support was expected but oversight was unwelcome, gradually gave way to recognition that our relationship had fundamentally changed. 6 months after the break, my father called with what felt like genuine contrition. "I've been reflecting on what happened," he said, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "I didn't see how my actions were undermining the values I claim to uphold." Financial responsibility was something I preached but wasn't practicing with the fund. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of everything that had transpired, but it was a start. Over the following months, we began rebuilding trust through small steps. Transparent conversations, respect for boundaries, and a notable absence of financial entanglement. My mother, initially caught between loyalty to my father and desire to reconnect with me, eventually found her own voice in the situation. During a quiet lunch, just the two of us, she offered an insight that surprised me. "The fund changed us," she admitted. "Having access to money we hadn't earned ourselves, it made decisions too easy. Your father and I built our life dollar by dollar, with hard choices along the way. That discipline got lost when the fund provided an easy solution to everything." Aunt Patricia and Derek remained estranged by their choice rather than mine. The occasional family gatherings I attended were marked by their pointed absence or early departures. Derek's social media posts occasionally included veiled references to so-called family who show their true colors, but these bothered me less with each passing month. As family dynamics stabilized into their new configurations, I developed a more intentional approach to family support. Rather than the open-ended fund that had created dependency and resentment, I established specific, transparent support for needs I valued. For Jennifer's children, I created education accounts with clear terms and regular statements sent to both Jennifer and myself. This ensured the money would be used as intended, while providing transparency that prevented misunderstandings. When Uncle Robert needed specialized equipment for a large contract, I structured a proper business loan with favorable but clear terms, documentation, and repayment schedule, treating him with the respect of a business partner rather than a charity case. For family medical emergencies, I worked with a healthcare advocate to establish a process that could provide assistance while maintaining appropriate privacy and dignity for those involved. The common thread in these approaches was moving away from financial support as an unspoken obligation toward intentional giving with clear parameters and mutual respect. The changes weren't just about protecting my assets. They were about honoring the true value of both money and relationships by not conflating them. My personal growth extended beyond family boundaries. I developed new friendships that weren't shadowed by financial dynamics. I discovered the freedom of being valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. 6 months after the break, I met Sophia at a charity event for financial literacy education. Our relationship developed naturally, without the baggage of family expectations or financial imbalance coloring our interactions. Through this journey, I've learned lessons that will guide me for life. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're necessary for genuine relationships. The discomfort they sometimes cause is the growing pain of authenticity replacing pretense. True generosity includes accountability. Giving without oversight can enable destructive patterns rather than providing real help. Respect can't be purchased. Financial support offered to buy family harmony creates resentment on both sides of the equation. Healthy relationships require balanced reciprocity. This doesn't mean equal financial contribution, but rather equal investment in mutual well-being and honesty. Sometimes the most loving action is standing firm. Real care might mean withholding what's wanted to provide what's needed, even when that's boundaries and consequences. The family fund I created with such hope 3 years ago ultimately failed in its stated purpose. Yet its collapse cleared the way for something more valuable: relationships based on truth rather than transaction, support that empowers rather than enables, and personal boundaries that make genuine connection possible. I still believe in helping family. I still contribute to my niece and nephew's future, support ventures I believe in, and respond to genuine emergencies. The difference is that now this giving flows from choice rather than obligation, with transparency rather than manipulation, and with mutual respect rather than power dynamics. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family financial dynamics, know that establishing boundaries doesn't mean abandoning love. Sometimes it's the first step toward discovering what real love, not clouded by money or obligation, actually looks like. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family or friends? How did you navigate the aftermath? Share your experiences in the comments. Your story might help someone else finding their way through similar challenges. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding authenticity in complicated relationships. Remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most necessary growth. Thank you for listening, and I wish you courage in your own boundary-setting journey.